void shimmered with the slow pulse of a dying star as the Thauran Dominion's flagship, Vigilant Crown, glided over the smoldering ruin of Eden 4. The once lush colony, once a bright hope for human expansion, now drifted in silence, ash and dust orbiting in the vacuum like an epitaph. Admiral Vorik Zesh watched the destruction from the viewing platform, his 4 pupils narrowing to slits as flames bled across the atmosphere below. The humans had resisted longer than expected, 17 minutes instead of the usual 6, but it made little difference in the end. Every world burned the same color. "They scream but never beg," his adjutant Seraph remarked, his voice dry and metallic. He stood a respectful distance behind Vorik, wings folded against his spine. "Strange, isn't it? For prey species, they die without comprehension. Almost admirable." Vorik didn't answer immediately. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, a creature carved by centuries of conquest, his skin plated like obsidian armor, his gaze carrying the weight of an empire. He had been leading fleets since before the Dominion had reached its 1,000th world, and war had become routine, a process as sterile as it was efficient. Yet there was something about these humans that refused to settle neatly into the Dominion's catalog of conquered species. "They believe in something," Vorik murmured. "Even when they've lost everything, they act as if loss is temporary, as if they'll return." Seraph made a soft sound of amusement. "Faith. It's an evolutionary defect." Below, the last of the human outposts vanished under orbital bombardment. Vorik gave the order with a single gesture, his voice devoid of triumph. "Finish it." Moments later, a tactical officer approached, kneeling in the Thauran gesture of deference. "Admiral, we've intercepted a signal from the surface. Not a distress call, it's addressed to you." Vorik turned from the viewport. "Play it." A burst of static filled the chamber. Then, through the distortion, came a voice. "Female. Human. Come. This is Earth Command. We've received your message." Silence followed. Vorik's upper crest lifted in curiosity. "Their command still functions." Seraph chuckled. A bluff. A last attempt at relevance. But Vorik wasn't convinced. He had heard fear before. He had heard begging, fury, even defiance, but never that tone. It was poised, deliberate, almost amused. He found himself leaning forward slightly, trying to hear more in the quiet that followed. The officer waited for orders. "Shall I trace it, Admiral?" "No," Vorik said softly. "Let them speak first." He dismissed the crew and walked alone to the observation deck. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, a canvas painted in cold fire. The Thauran had ruled for millennia. They had outlasted rivals, silenced rebellions, extinguished species that dared imagine freedom. Yet victory, once intoxicating, had grown hollow. He wondered if the humans knew what it meant to fight something eternal, something that had forgotten why it fought at all. When Seraph joined him again, carrying a data pad with casualty reports, Vorik didn't look. "Do you ever think, Seraph," he said, "that perhaps we are the ones repeating ourselves? Repetition is stability, Admiral. Stability is strength." "And stagnation?" Vorik asked. Seraph hesitated, an irrelevant concern for those who command. The answer was textbook, exactly what the Academy taught. Vorik smiled faintly, not from amusement, but from weariness. The younger officers had never known true resistance. They had inherited conquest like an heirloom, not earned it in blood. To them, war was arithmetic. A tremor rippled through the deck, the final colony's reactor imploding. From the viewport, a plume of fire briefly outshone the nearby star. Vorik closed his eyes. It was over, or so it should have been. The next voice that reached him did not come through comms, but from behind, a whisper, ragged, human. The guards had brought in one of the captured colonists for interrogation. A woman, scarred and half-burned, but standing straight despite her restraints. She stared at Vorik with the kind of focus that made lesser officers look away. "You should have left us sleeping," she said. Vorik tilted his head. "Explain." Her lips cracked into something between a smile and a grimace. "You think you found us early. You didn't. We've been watching stars longer than you've been naming them." Seraph snorted. "Delirium." But Vorik stepped closer. The woman's pulse was weak, her breath uneven, yet her eyes burned with certainty. "What does that mean?" Vorik asked. "It means," she whispered, "you don't know what wakes when we're threatened." Before he could question further, her vitals flatlined. Vorik stood over her for a moment, studying the body as though it were another riddle of war. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades, anticipation. "Admiral," Sareth began cautiously, "we should depart. The Dominion Council awaits confirmation of total human collapse." "Yes," Vorik said absently. He turned once more to the void. The planet's debris reflected faintly against his armor, tiny fragments of a world destroyed. "Transmit victory report." As Sareth moved to comply, Vorik added quietly, "And note this species under provisional review." "Review, sir." "Until I understand what she meant." He lingered there long after the bridge had emptied, watching Eden IV's ashes drift into the dark. The hum of the engines seemed louder than usual, the silence between transmissions heavier. For the first time in many campaigns, the aftermath did not feel complete. He replayed the human's words in his mind, trying to decipher the tone. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't despair. It was a promise. Outside, the wreckage of the colony reflected starlight like a field of scattered teeth. Vorik could almost imagine the planet glaring back at him. Somewhere in that debris, perhaps in some buried bunker, humanity's real voice was still speaking, waiting for the right moment to answer the Dominion in kind. He dismissed the thought. Yet as the vigilant crown turned away from Eden 4 and accelerated into the warp corridor, Vorik glanced once more at the fading light of the human world and found himself whispering, "What do you know that I don't?" No one answered. Only the hum of the engines filled the silence, steady, endless, pretending that nothing in the galaxy had changed. But beneath that silence, somewhere deep and unspoken, something had begun to stir. The stars over Earth were calm, indifferent to the fleet descending through them. The Thaurin armada stretched across the void like a storm front, dozens of dreadnoughts in formation, their hulls carved with symbols of conquest. At the front of the formation, Admiral Vorik stood once again at the viewport of the vigilant crown, watching the blue-green sphere come into view. It looked deceptively peaceful, wrapped in its atmosphere and oceans, no sign of resistance visible. The humans, he thought, had finally accepted the inevitable. "Readings confirm no orbital defense," Sareth reported, his tone brimming with satisfaction. "Primitive energy output. They haven't even weaponized their satellites. It's almost disappointing." Vorik's gaze lingered on the planet. Almost. He wasn't sure why the word came out softer than intended. The human woman's final words still echoed faintly in his mind. "You should have left us sleeping." He brushed it away, turning to his officers. "Begin atmospheric scanning. Let's end this properly." Engines roared through the fleet. Swarms of drones descended toward the upper atmosphere, dispersing through the ionosphere in coordinated arcs. Everything proceeded with mechanical precision until the readings came back wrong. "Admiral," a sensor technician said, hesitating, "our scans are fragmenting. Planetary data is inconsistent. Magnetic fields shifting faster than predicted." Sareth frowned. "Jamming? From a pre-industrial world." Vorik said nothing. He moved closer to the display, studying the distortion patterns. They weren't random. They pulsed in deliberate rhythm, binary patterns structured, almost like breathing. Someone was answering their scans. "Proceed with orbital bombardment," Vorik ordered, voice level. "If they're hiding, we'll flush them out." The command relayed through the fleet. Energy coils charged, targeting systems aligned, and then, without warning, the Dominion's weapons went dark. One by one, the dreadnought's cannons powered down. The bridges flickered. Crews shouted in confusion. Vorik's console went blank, every interface dissolving into static. "Report," he barked. "Systems unresponsive. Primary core offline. Admiral, something's overriding the fire control grid." In the chaos, a sound filled the comm channel. It was not static, it was a voice. Calm. Female. The same voice that had haunted him since Eden 4. "You came all this way, Admiral," it said. "Why don't you come closer?" Every officer froze. Vorik felt the air change, as though the temperature itself had dropped. "Identify the source," he said, though he already knew. "Origin point, North American continent," a technician stammered. Signal triangulated to, wait, subsurface. "Deep under the crust." "Underground. They're hiding underground." Sareth hissed. Vorik looked back at Earth. The oceans glinted in the sunlight, serene. "No," he murmured. "They're waiting." The voice returned, softer now, almost conversational. "We wondered when you'd finally notice us. You've been busy with our decoys." "Decoys?" Vorik repeated. The holographic map flickered. The images of destroyed human colonies appeared: Eden 4, Carina Base, Vesta Prime, then fractured, reforming into data streams. Their population numbers, communications, even distress signals, all code. Fabricated. They weren't real, Sareth whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. The human woman continued, "You've been studying shadows, Admiral. We've been studying you." A low murmur ran through the bridge. Vorik could feel it, the subtle shift of power, the first tremor of understanding spreading among his officers. He closed his eyes briefly, forcing his voice steady. "What do you want?" The reply came after a heartbeat. "To see what you do next." Every word was measured, deliberate. Vorik felt a thin thread of dread coil inside him. It wasn't just that humans had outmaneuvered them, it was how calm they were about it. That composure carried a weight he recognized: control. "Admiral," Sareth said quietly, "we should retreat. Report to the Council before they—" "Before they what?" Vorik asked. The answer came from outside. Earth's oceans began to ripple. Vast segments of the sea drew apart as colossal metallic structures rose from beneath the surface. Orbital launch arrays, black as obsidian, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns of blue light. From the moon's far side, massive platforms unfolded, synchronized like a machine waking from sleep. Within seconds, the planet that had seemed defenseless was a fortress. The Vigilant Crown's sensors reactivated, flooded with readings, graviton distortions, energy spikes beyond Thaurin classification. Vorik felt the blood drain from his face. "Those aren't primitive defenses." "Impossible," Sareth breathed. "They couldn't have built that undetected." "They didn't build it for us to see," Vorik said. The human voice came again, this time from every frequency simultaneously, filling the air like a whisper in the bones. "You should have stayed in your empire, Admiral. The void was safer." Before he could respond, Earth's orbital arrays fired. No light, no sound, just a single flash of absence. A Dominion frigate vanished, cleanly, silently, its atoms stripped apart mid-space. Then another, and another. "Return fire." Sareth screamed. "We can't," the weapons officer shouted. "Our systems are locked." Vorik stared at the tactical display as one of the largest dreadnoughts disintegrated into dust. The attack wasn't chaotic, it was surgical, impersonal. Whoever commanded this defense wasn't fighting a war. They were conducting an experiment. "Admiral," the voice said, calm as still water, "you asked what Earth's apex predator was." Static crackled through the bridge. Vorik turned toward the sound as though facing an unseen presence. "You're speaking to her." Then silence. Vorik stood motionless, the echoes of that sentence sinking deep into him. Around him, officers scrambled, shouting over one another, but their panic felt distant. He understood something they didn't. The humans had never been prey. They had been waiting, measuring, preparing, playing weak until the galaxy came too close. He issued the retreat command quietly, his voice cutting through the noise. "All ships, fall back to Dominion space. Now." Sareth stared at him. "You're retreating? From primitives." Vorik's eyes, once gleaming with arrogance, were cold and focused. "Not primitives," he said. "Predators." The warp engine screamed to life as the fleet turned away, half its strength already gone. On the viewport, Earth grew smaller, receding into the dark, yet Vorik couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him leave. In the silence that followed, he realized he no longer felt bored. For the first time in centuries, he felt alive. And terrified. He glanced at the stars ahead, Dominion space, his empire, his illusion of safety, and whispered to himself, "We woke something ancient. And it's smiling." Behind him, Earth rotated in the void, serene once more. The oceans reflected sunlight, the continents glowed faintly, and beneath the clouds, the world that had just devoured an armada waited in perfect stillness, as though nothing at all had happened. The Dominion's capital world gleamed beneath its glass sky, towers of crystal and alloy piercing the clouds like frozen lightning. It was a place that had never known defeat, where every structure sang of victory and permanence. Yet as Admiral Vorik stepped from his transport, silence followed him. The plaza that once greeted returning conquerors with fanfare now regarded him with thinly veiled suspicion. The humans had not just broken his fleet, they had broken the Dominion's certainty. Inside the Hall of Governance, the light was filtered through panels of gold, bathing the council chamber in a sterile glow. The High Council sat in semicircular formation, their faces impassive masks of age and arrogance. Vorik stood at the center, the single mark of failure in a society that tolerated none. "You fled," intoned Archon Velith, his voice soft but cutting. "From a pre-industrial world." Vorik didn't flinch. "From Earth," he said evenly. "And if you'd been there, Archon, you would have fled too." Laughter rippled through the chamber, cold and derisive. "You were deceived by theatrics," Velith said. "We've analyzed your report, fabricated colonies, false transmissions. Clever, perhaps, but not dangerous." "They are dangerous," Vorik said, the words firm but measured. "Every colony they let us destroy was bait. Every ship we lost was part of their study. They learned our formation protocols, our encryption patterns, our response times. They knew exactly how we'd react before we fired a single shot." A younger counselor leaned forward. "You're suggesting they possess predictive warfare intelligence? On a species barely past combustion engines?" Vorik's jaw tightened. "I'm suggesting they've been evolving for war longer than we've been evolving for peace." For the first time, silence held. Vorik activated a hollow projection, and the chamber filled with human images, recordings extracted from captured data cores. Battles spanning centuries, trenches drowned in mud, skies filled with mushroom clouds, cities turned to fire. The Council watched in collective disbelief as humanity's history unfolded, a species killing itself with an artistry that defied comprehension. Velith's voice wavered for the first time. "Why would any species do this to its own kind?" "Because they could," Vorik said. "Because their evolution demanded it. They learned strategy through extinction. Mercy, restraint, morality, those came later as tools, not virtues." He stopped the projection on a single image, a group of human soldiers, faces streaked with dirt, standing over the ruins of a battlefield. Their expressions were not of triumph, but exhaustion. "These are not conquerors," Vorik said quietly. "They are survivors. That's worse." Velith leaned back, the confidence returning to his tone. "Even if your assessment is correct, they lack the scale to challenge us. We have fleets, we have centuries of infrastructure." "Then explain this," Vorik interrupted. The chamber lights dimmed as a live transmission filled the air, reports from distant sectors, fleets missing, colonies silent, communication relays going dark. Each disappearance marked a system gone without trace. Counselors whispered. Velith rose sharply. "What are we seeing?" Vorik's gaze was steady. Their response. No declarations, no warnings. Just absence. The Archon's voice faltered. "You mean they're attacking us?" "They're dismantling us," Vorik replied. Quietly, efficiently, like we once did to lesser worlds. Panic began to ripple through the council, though none would admit it aloud. Vorik saw it in their eyes, the understanding that the Fauran had met something they couldn't categorize. Velith tried one last act of denial. "Then we must retaliate. Mobilize every fleet. If they want war, we will." "They don't want war," Vorik said, his voice a low thunder. "They want to end it before it begins." A silence fell so complete that even the automated servitors seemed to pause. Vorik looked at the shimmering map of the Dominion's territories, hundreds of worlds glowing softly in holographic blue. "They think in centuries," he continued. "While we've been perfecting rule, they've been perfecting patience. Every step we took toward them was one they allowed." Velith's composure cracked. "You're suggesting they anticipated the Dominion's expansion." "I'm suggesting they invited it." The council erupted into argument. Accusations, disbelief, strategy proposals, all noise. Vorik stood apart, letting their panic devour itself. Through the chaos, his thoughts returned to that calm, human voice. It had not spoken like prey, or even like a victor. It had spoken like something that had already accepted its place atop the chain. Later, alone in his quarters, Vorik played the recording again. "You asked what Earth's apex predator was," the voice said. "You're speaking to her." He stared into the darkness, hearing something beneath the words now, a quiet confidence laced with sorrow. They weren't reveling in their power. They were warning him. He activated a private channel to his fleet commanders, transmitting sealed orders. "Prepare contingency defense protocols. Silent pattern. No transmissions. Assume observation." One of his captains dared to question. "Observation, Admiral? By whom?" Vorik hesitated, then replied, "By the only species that never needed to announce its hunt." The channel closed. He looked out across the spires of the Dominion capital, gleaming under the artificial sun. Below, citizens moved like clockwork, their world still believing itself invincible. He envied them, The comfort of ignorance, the peace before comprehension. A chime interrupted his thoughts. A new report appeared on his console, unverified, scrambled. He decrypted it manually. The message was short, unsigned, in standard galactic script, but unmistakably human. "We are not your enemy, Admiral. But we will be if you make us one." For a long moment, Vorik simply stared. There was no threat in the words, no arrogance, only inevitability. He shut down the display and exhaled slowly. He understood now that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was the precision of restraint. They fought like predators not because they wanted to, but because they had learned to wait until the world offered no other option. He turned toward the window once more, the lights of the city reflected in his eyes like distant fires. The Dominion, vast and ancient, no longer felt infinite. Somewhere beyond the stars, Earth was awake and watching. Vorik straightened his uniform, the gesture automatic. "So this is what fear feels like," he said softly. Then more quietly, "Perhaps they've always known it better than we have." Outside, the night side of the capital darkened as distant stars blinked out one by one, communication beacons going silent, like candles snuffed by an unseen hand. Vorik didn't call for investigation. He simply watched, understanding that whatever came next would not be a war in the traditional sense. It would be a reckoning. The Dominion's last fleet gathered above the world of Halvern Prime, its ships arrayed like a dying constellation. Below, the planet glowed under siege, fires blooming across continents as the remains of Thauran civilization clawed to survive. Admiral Vorik stood on the command bridge of the Vigilant Crown, its hull scarred and blackened, the once proud flagship reduced to a relic of endurance. Around him, the air smelled faintly of scorched metal and defeat. His officers moved like ghosts, performing duties that no longer mattered. Every channel crackled with silence. Humanity had cut them off from a galaxy one system at a time. "Admiral," Sarah said softly, approaching with the caution of someone speaking to a condemned man. "We've lost communication with the core fleets. No response from the Council. Halvern is all that remains." Vorik didn't turn. He watched the holographic display, blinking red icons where hundreds of Dominion worlds had been. Now there were fewer than a dozen. He thought of the arrogance that once filled these halls, of Archon Velitha's laughter when he had spoken of humanity. All gone, consumed not by rage or invasion, but by something far colder. "How long until they reach us?" Vorik asked. "Unknown," Seraph replied. "Their movements are impossible to predict. They don't follow lanes. They appear where we're weakest." Vorik almost smiled. That's what predators do. A tremor shook the bridge. Outside the viewport, the stars distorted, rippling as if the universe itself bent under pressure. Then, from the void they came. The human fleet emerged without sound or light, hundreds of vessels slipping into orbit with mathematical precision. They did not announce themselves. They simply appeared. The bridge fell silent. The Thauran officers stared, some in awe, others in resignation. The human ships were smaller than the Dominion dreadnoughts, built for speed and efficiency, their dark hulls absorbing starlight. Yet their formation was flawless, their approach terrifying in its serenity. Seraph swallowed hard. "Orders, Admiral?" "None," Vorik said. "There's nothing left to command." A voice filled the bridge, calm, familiar, inescapable. "Admiral Vorik." He closed his eyes briefly. "Admiral Lin," he said, "you finally speak to me directly." The hologram flickered, and she appeared before him, Mara Lin of Earth, her uniform simple, her face unyielding. Her eyes held the same quiet authority that had haunted his thoughts since Eden 4. She was neither young nor old, but she carried herself like someone who had seen every kind of ending. "Your empire is finished," she said. "Stand down. We offer surrender." Seraph stepped forward, disbelief twisting his features. "Surrender? After annihilating our worlds?" Lin's expression did not change. "We didn't annihilate them. We silenced their weapons, disabled their infrastructure, and left them breathing. The Thauran chose to destroy themselves rather than adapt." Vorik studied her face. "And if we refuse?" Her gaze met his with unbearable calm. "Then history repeats itself. You taught us that." He felt the weight of centuries pressing on him, the Dominion's endless conquests, the exterminations they justified as progress. Humanity had learned well, perhaps too well. "You could have ended us quietly," he said. "Why speak now?" "Because you're the last one who still listens," Lin said. "You saw what was coming before anyone else. That earns mercy." He laughed, a hollow sound. Mercy. Is that what you call this? Mercy is giving you a choice, she said. Obey, and your people live. Resist, and extinction becomes a lesson, not a punishment. Vorik turned away, staring out at the planet below, where smoke curled upward into the stratosphere. You sound like us, he said quietly. For the first time, her voice softened. No, you sound like what we used to be. The words hit him harder than any weapon. He looked at her again, truly seeing her, the restraint in her posture, the exhaustion behind her composure. Humanity hadn't won through hatred, they had won because they no longer needed to hate. That realization terrified him more than their fleets. Sareth drew his weapon suddenly, his hands shaking. We can't let them. Vorik moved faster than thought, seizing the weapon and turning it aside. The blast seared the bulkhead, filling the air with smoke. Enough, he said, voice quiet but final. This war ended before it began. Sareth stared at him, betrayal in his eyes. You're surrendering to them. Vorik nodded slowly. I'm recognizing reality. He faced Lynn again. If I surrender, what happens to my people? They'll rebuild, she said. Under our guidance. Under yours, if you wish. The galaxy needs order, Admiral. It just doesn't need yours. Something in him eased, an ache he hadn't realized was there until that moment. The Thaurin had ruled for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to stop fighting, to stand still and breathe. He stepped closer to her projection. And if I accept? Lynn regarded him with something almost like respect. Then you'll help us shape what comes next. He hesitated, the silence between them stretching like the void. Finally he said, I never thought I'd see the day the hunters became prey. Her reply was quiet, but it carried through the air like the edge of a blade. Predators adapt, Admiral. It's what keeps them alive. He lowered his head in acknowledgement. Then I yield. For the Dominion, for what remains. The hologram flickered as Lynn nodded once. Transmission acknowledged. Welcome to the Concordant, Admiral Vorik. The human ships shifted formation, descending toward Halvern Prime. There was no triumph, no fanfare, only motion, silent and precise, like a machine performing maintenance on a wounded organism. The Thaurin fleet powered down its weapons. Across the stars, other systems followed. The war, so vast and inevitable, ended without a final battle. Vorik stood alone as the bridge lights dimmed. For the first time in his life, he felt the quiet that came after survival, not victory, not loss, just the end. Later, on the surface of Halvern, he walked among his people, who stared skyward as human vessels descended like falling stars. He expected resentment, rebellion, but saw only relief. Even predators, it seemed, grew weary of being hunters. When night came, he stood on the edge of the city, looking up at the vastness of space. Lynn's voice came through the calm, softer now. It's over, Admiral. Nothing is ever over, he replied. It just changes shape. She was silent for a moment. Then let's hope we're wise enough to shape it better this time. He smiled faintly. Hope, he said. That's a human word. Not anymore, she said, and the line went dead. Vorik looked at the stars, and for the first time in his memory, they didn't look distant. They looked alive. The Dominion's banners had fallen, its arrogance shattered, but something new stood in its place, something that didn't roar or boast or burn. It simply watched, waiting, patient as evolution itself. And far above, in the quiet dark, Earth turned slowly through the void, its oceans calm, its skies bright, its apex predator at rest for now.